let me introduce you who's our speaker today. Okay, Tim Sitt is a registered social worker and psychotherapist in private practice in Ontario, working with individuals, couples, and families. With over 20 years of immersion in Virginia Satir's transformative model, including training with her students and senior colleagues, Tim's work centers on two interwoven themes: self connection, that's authentic contact with one's deeper core self, and the freedom of movement, somatic and emotional fluidity as a foundation for well being. His experiential systemic practice integrates mind body awareness and relational patterns to help clients access inner resources and foster lasting change. Tim is also author of Move or Die, published 2017, and has recently completed his forthcoming book, Self Connection: Connect to Yourself, Change the World. He also hosts the Self Connection podcast. Okay, Tim, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Natalie.
You're welcome.
So today we're going to talk about what I've been studying for a while, and for many of you, you'll be familiar with the content in its original form from Virginia Satir. So it has to do with the discussion about the fundamental beliefs, and I think understanding Virginia's foundational beliefs, her paradigm, are really important in understanding the way she was working with people and the depth that she was able to work with people. And so as I've looked at this content and really tried to understand it, my hope is to evolve. I'm not starting something new, but really just trying to extend the branches of the tree that I think many of us are connected to because of our love of this work and love of her work and our inspiration being connected there. So I'll start with a quote from Carl Jung, which I think is very relevant to understanding process and understanding Virginia. He says, "There's no energy unless there is a tension of opposites. It's necessary to discover the opposite to the attitude of the conscious mind." Okay, so as it relates to hierarchy and seed, I believe that in the frame that this is typically presented, and so if you look at the Satir model book, uh, it's presented in a binary way. So we have one column describing what the world looks like on this side of things and what the world looks on the side of what Virginia coined the seed model. And so in looking at it that way, there are important distinctions there that I think are helpful and really in understanding family systems, understanding the worth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share, since I presented this in 2020, as some of you know, and I'll show you sort of the evolution of my thinking on this as it's become more detailed. And I hope it's helpful in the many roles. Most of us are working with people, working with as therapists, but I believe that this model, which I'm calling the Tree of Life model, will be useful across many different roles, and in particular in helping us connect to ourselves, connect to the sacred ground of being. So I would add or I would adjust this quote from Jung, the thinking about energy, but thinking about life. Life exists in the tension of opposites. So if you play guitar, you can imagine the strings are uh, tied between 2 points, and all of the infinite variables exist in our ability to play between these 2 points. And so it doesn't exist in any one point. It's not right or wrong. It's the infinite possibilities of play that exist between 2 points. And so the 2 points we're going to look at, and then the infinite variable that starts to open up is the hierarchy and the seed. So Virginia looked at four questions or four aspects of being, and they are, she would say, if she knew the answer to these four, she would be able to really assist and help transform whatever was stuck for people or for families or for systems. And so the first element is the self, and that is, how do we define a person? Self-other, how do we define relationships? Context, how do we explain events? Like, how do things happen? How do they come to be? And finally, what is the attitude we hold towards change? So I'm going to walk briefly through the original content, and then I will share my addition. So again, I'll go through it pretty quickly. Many of this is referenced from the Satir model book and other presentations, but it'll be useful to ground us in sort of the original presentation. So I'll read just a few points so you can get a flavor of what these things sound like. So for the person, one of the elements or aspects is that people must conform and obey shoulds to survive, and feelings and differences are denied. So the experience or the selfhood of the person is denied for the sake of rules, so family rules. So for some, the family rules might have to do with things that you can or cannot talk about, or roles that you need to be in, whether that's a parentified child, or we don't talk about negative emotions or whatever. So the self is denied in that. People are born with the potential to be evil. People are expected to think, feel, and act like one another, or to live up to external norms. So the conformity of maybe cultural context or cultural rules or family rules constrain or oppress the unique individual. The relationships between people are of unequal value. So people experience relationships in a dominant one up, one down kind of way. And roles and status are confused with identity. Roles imply superiority or uh, being better than or more valuable than others. And events are caused linearly. So you think about things in an A causes B kind of way, and only one right way exists, and only the dominant person knows. And finally, change. Uh, change is to be rejected or undesirable. The unfamiliar is uncomfortable. So one of the things, if you look at all these elements, and in the way that it's presented, and whether we call it hierarchy or dominant submission, there's aspects to every element here that if you look at it, and one of the things that I gained from Virginia is studying Alfred Korzybski's work, and he really looked at the utility of language and the limitations of language. So he would say, whenever you say something is true, so this is an apple, it's also not true, right? So if we look at each of these elements, um, there's an aspect to which the shoulds and the rules constrain and conform us in ways that are oppressive, and that there are ways that we have rules and we have structure that really help us, right? So not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. What my hope is to articulate the specific ingredients of hierarchy in relationship to the whole, which I'm calling the tree, so that we can retain what's useful and worth understanding about these different things. So, for example, right now we're all sort of following a cue of the structure of a Zoom meeting, and the speaker speaks, and you guys are all being cooperative and not. You could turn your mic on and start speaking over me, but we're obeying some rules that are, you know, if my 3-year-old was in the room, she might not be cooperating with. So the next aspect, and again, I'm just sharing it here because it captures everything that's in the text. The Satir model, it's written by John Banman, Marie Gamori, and Jane Gerber. So the seed model, as presented by Virginia, uh, has the element of the person being, each person's unique and defined from their inner resources. There's a sacredness to people, and they're connected to a universal life force. So it's this beautiful, really empowering way of seeing people that I think for me, and being a young therapist when I was still in school, was a really unique perspective. Carl Rogers also from a humanistic perspective, Irvin Yalom, these people, but Virginia embodied it in a really special way because of the way she moved, the way that she touched, the way that she sculpted. You could really see the embodiment and the way she was able to perceive the sacred worth of each person. In looking at relationships, people are of equal value, and relationships exist between people of equal value. Roles and status are distinct from identity. Um, and so this emphasis of equality and emphasis of being able to accept that people are going to be the same and different in many ways, but that we can perceive, and this is the seed layer, that we can perceive the sacredness and uniqueness of each person and move from that place. So even between a parent and a child, she would put the child up on a chair to symbolize, even though your bodies are of different sizes, uh, you're worth seeing eye to eye. You're worth perceiving and beholding one another in a dignified way, one of respect and of um, understanding. So events, this is the systemic lens that events occur in multivariable ways. Things are far more complicated than we seem to make them. And an example of this is her way of, she would say that diagnostic categories were like using um, naughty language. And so she moved away from diagnostic linear labels from psychiatry and really focused on understanding how the multivariable aspects of people within people, parts party, or between people, interpersonal dynamics worked. Um, and then finally, she emphasized a developing uh, openness and bravery in the face of change and being willing to move through it. So just as I said in the hierarchy, if you looked at any elements of the hierarchy that was discussed before, you could probably find a situation where it would be relevant to uphold that and to say there's probably a healthy moment where we would want to retain that. And here, it's the same thing. Anytime, like, there's an aspect to which you could look at things presented here and say there's probably a moment where, so for example, as far as role is concerned, um, in in a particular context, people have different roles and different levels of power and decision making, and so that's to be made distinct, but in relationship to this seed layer. Um, and change as well. So there's a discussion here about we grow through change and growth, and change is inevitable and good. But there's aspects to which the resistance to change may be a good thing. It may be good to uh, re retain status quo and what that looks like. Okay, so my hope here is to provide an offering to expand the work that was done. And Virginia died in 1988. So I think it's part of our opportunity and legacy to learn from her and to expand. And um, so it's not that it's not, the issue isn't with hierarchy alone. It's the loss of the connection between hierarchy and the seed. And in the book that I've written on self-connection, one of the things that I say is that evil exists in the world because I think of this unconscious disconnection between hierarchy and the seed. And so when we look at the elements of hierarchy, which are have to do with power, roles, structure, when these elements are disconnected from the seed layer, that's when we really run into trouble. So we're going to look at the 5 elements of hierarchy as I've studied it and tried to come to an understanding about it. Um, and so I'll let you just kind of absorb these words and let them sort of land for you. So I think when hierarchy is working well, it's sequenced actually in a particular order. So we start with meaning and purpose. What is the meaning of uh, or purpose that this group is meeting for, right? What is the ultimate aim? In what uh, service or what aspect are we deriving meaning? So if we start with meaning, then we have structure. So the structure could be we meet in a building, or we meet at certain times. The roles are the individual roles that are assigned. So Eileen has a role, Natalie has a role, and you all have different roles in your lives. And then power has to do with decision making and who has the right to say what happens. And judgment has to do with evaluation and how well it's going. So when the hierarchical elements are reversed and we start with power and judgment, then things can get corrupted, uh, incoherent. They can get violent when things like power and judgment and role are emphasized over meaning, structure, and the seed elements. Okay, so we'll go into this a little bit more detail. So we want to, what I'm suggesting is we want to reclaim hierarchy. And when these elements are connected with the seed layer, which we'll see, we really elevate them. We bring a consciousness and awareness to them that didn't exist before. So power has to do with who gets to decide what happens. So in a healthy system, its power is held transparently. People are very clear about the limitations of their power, and they use it to be in service of the whole community, the whole family, the whole organization. Um, and it is aware and sensitive and protective of the vulnerable. So unhealthy would be power is hoarded or abdicated. So it's either done in a dictatorial way, or it's done in an abusive way, or it's avoided, like it's not picked up. Maybe there's something that one ought to do that they could do that they forgo. Um, and power is used through coercion or fear or force. Uh, Meaning is the why. What justifies the meaning and purpose of the whole system? Why are we here? And a unifying purpose gives all the other elements. I think as far as hierarchy of the hierarchy, meaning stands at the top. When we know why we're here and what gives us fulfillment and meaning, we can really start making decisions about the way we use power in a healthier way. So when there's no meaning, or when it's blurred, it can really start to corrupt the way that the hierarchy functions. So we have role. Role defines who does what around here, and when it's healthy, it's clarified, and it does not diminish personhood. It's assigned by capacity or competence and interest, and people can grow in their roles. When roles are disconnected from the self, when it's disconnected from sacredness, from the seed layer, the roles can be status laden and confused with people's worth. And that's when there's obviously a clear connection to power than being used in an abusive or harmful or corrupt way. Structure has to do with the question of how are things done here? What are the rules, the walls, the building, the clear, consistent roles and responsibilities, that people have a map that reduces ambiguity. And when it's unhealthy, the roles are either inconsistent, right? So we think about attachment, we think about uh, mixed attachment, or homes that are, one moment parents can be very warm and loving, and in another moment violent and unpredictable. And so that lack of structure, the lack of routines, is really hard on children, because uh, it's so necessary in their development that they can have a scaffold from which to develop and be successful. The final element is judgment. How are we doing? How are we doing individually and collectively? It's the evaluation, the feedback, and when it's anchored in a respect of compassion, and we're able to offer feedback in a person-centered way, uh, we can really grow. And judgment in an unhealthy way is when it's done in a cruel or a, you know, it's like name calling, right? It's actually not helpful to call someone a name because it just disparages and doesn't offer anything clear or concrete. So these are the five elements. I'll just circle back to this so you can see them in relationship. And then I'll circle them forward. I want to show you this image. And so that's at the branch level. So we got, if you just look at the branch level, we have power, role, meaning, judgment, and structure. Okay, we'll come back to that image. We'll go through the elements of this seed. So the elements of the seed, and this is through my own reflection and studying Virginia's work and studying others. I believe the five elements of the seed layer are sacred worth, uniqueness, process, growth, and connection. So sacred worth, and again, this is the element that I think when I perceive the way that Virginia would, I remember a video I watched of her. She was working with a family where the mother was abusive and the kids weren't able to see their mom anymore. And the way she just put her hand under their chin, it was like, and she would get down to their level. It's like the apprehension and the perception of their worth was so powerful. And so to be in touch with that, uh, your intrinsic value, um, connection that um, we there's something fundamental about connection for all human beings, and it's part of when I think about the seed layer, I think about the soil. So it's like the richness of the soil is in the connection, the way that the roots are connected to the earth, and how that connection then nurtures the rest of the tree, and then the tree fundamentally is in connection to uh, the sun and to the air, and then the creatures that are coexisting. Um, and then we have uniqueness. And, the famous quote from Virginia is we connect through our sameness and we grow through our differences. And the uniqueness, what makes us unique, is really worth paying attention to. The things that make us weird or that differentiate us from others is part of our humanity, and being able to have compassion and respect for that, and to have space for that in others is really important, I think, for peace and for connection, and and then process. We're always in process, and this speaks to the multivariable systemic way that Virginia would work. And so everything is in process. And if we can respect the process and acknowledge growth, then whatever the outcome is, we can be resilient in the face of that. Um, and then the final piece is growth. That, uh, and this always struck me, this example from Carl Rogers when he described, um, growing up on a farm and seeing a bag of potatoes, and it was in a dark barn. And he remembers seeing this vine growing from one of the potatoes up towards the light, and that really symbolized and embodied and signified for him the growth element that we, as all living creatures, are connected to somehow. So that's the pool, that's the ocean that we're all swimming in, that there's this energy of growth. And Virginia was very much in touch with that and inspired me to believe in myself, that no matter what the situation or difficulty is, there's a opportunity for growth. And yeah, so that's the fifth element. So we have the tree of life model, which I'm introducing. We have power, role, meaning, judgment, and structure at the level of the branches. Think of that as a hierarchical layer. And then at the root level, the seed level, we have worth, uniqueness, process, growth, and connection. So we're grounded, we're anchored in our sacred worth in the seed layer. And the branches represent the arena of growth and opportunity to do things in the world and to enact change, embodied change structurally in systems and government and schools and in families and homes. The trunk layer has to do with the connection between these two layers and the way that the vitality and the movement from one layer to the other exists through dialogue. It exists through connection. And so these represent the different resources that I've been, when I look at the process of change, I've identified these as important aspects. I won't have time to go into detail about that, uh, but yeah, maybe for another time. Okay, so here's another depiction. Self-connection is involved as a process for all of these layers, but you could think of it as in connection to bridging the seed level with the hierarchical level. Okay. Um, and okay, so I'm going to tell you a story. So in 2018, I did an 8-day workshop with John Bam in BC. And there was a friend that I had there, and they were really needing a lot of support. And I was very much involved in this helping role. And then something happened, and they just all of a sudden had this transformational moment, and they didn't need me anymore. And just in the intensity of what was going on, I really felt like this void, and I felt this kind of emptiness and sad. I didn't really know what it was, but it it, it, it was something that I then um, picked up and did a piece of work with someone. And that someone actually was Anne Morrison. And I don't know if you know who Anne Morrison was, but she recently passed away. So I want to acknowledge her um, as a really beautiful soul in this community. And she really uh, touched my life and in this moment. So I was sitting with her and I just was able to go into process, into this visualization, and I could see what you see there on the screen, which is this collection of mechanical um, uh, tubes um, and I was looking at this ugly mass of metal, and I was like, what am I looking at? I had no idea what I was looking at, but it just felt dark. And if you know Star Trek, the Borg ship that you're looking at has to do with this alien race that would basically conquer other civilizations and turn them into these nasty cyborgs. And so I saw this image and I felt this sadness about the lack of life and vitality in this. And what this image of the Borg ship represented was the role, that my role as a helper, my role as a therapist, my role as being useful to people had encompassed so much of my definition of myself that without it, if I wasn't serving, if I wasn't helping, that I'd feel really empty. And so when I stayed in touch with this image, um, there's an invitation to go into what's not there, to go into this space of emptiness and to say, well, if that's not me, who am I? And then this other image came up, and it was an image of being on the beach and just being in the water and being in the ocean and being in the vastness and the spaciousness of the ocean. And there was something so grounding and healing about imagining this, that somehow I'm worthy, even if I'm not serving in a role. I'm worthy if somebody doesn't need me, that I have a nature, and that I am connected to something vaster than my ego, greater than my role. And so I imagine the relationship between the ocean and then the land, and I imagine the beach. And then I imagined sandcastles on the beach. And I thought, what if I thought of rules not as this mechanical mass, but what if I thought of rules as sandcastles on the sand, ready to be created and dispersed as needed, that we could play with rules in a way that kids play with sand at the beach. And the water tramples over it, and you don't freak out and think, "Oh my God, I'm gone." You just accept it and make something else. So it this process or this work that Anne helped me out with helped me connect to myself, self connection, and it helped me have a different relationship with my role. Um, so this image was so powerful to me. We were at Burnaby Mountain, and somebody had mentioned that there was a beach. I don't know, like 5 kilometers away. You have to run down the mountain. Um, so the next day, I got up and ran down the mountain, and I had no idea where I was going, but I found the beach, and I didn't have a bathing suit, but I just went in the water, and it to embody and to be in literally the ocean or an inlet of the ocean was so healing and so powerful, and just to swim in that and to connect to something that is really about the seed layer, right? My sacred worth, my connection to all that is, and um, that I'm oriented towards growth. And so it was a really anchoring and profound experience. And on one of the last days, I throughout the training, I was having this sort of like thought. It was um, I want to be special. I want to be special. Something about being special. And I just thought, what is that? That's just the ego, right? And I was sitting on a bench with my friend, and we were watching all the university students walking by. And I had this realization that we're all special, and that we're all have a star-like quality. And I had this thought of it's true. We're all stars in the vast sky. We are all unique. We all shine our unique light. And then I thought about my work with people, and I said, instead of thinking about having a client list, I want to think about having a star list. And the people that I'm working with are stars that have forgotten that they're stars, and that they just need help remembering. And if they can be in touch with that, which is, I think, what inspires uh, in looking at the way Virginia worked, is that's what I saw her doing. She was pointing people back to themselves and saying, you have it within you. You have the resources within you. You just have to trust and look and to experience that they're there. Okay. So the tree of life, um, this is it. And um, when we can connect and bring the elements of this seed into wherever we are, in whatever role, it can be really grounding. It can be empowering, and it can be insightful. It can be all kinds of things towards growth. It can be freeing. And then there are times when we need to just like trees do in the winter, they pull back their energy and then they drop away, right? They drop away their leaves and they say, I need to hibernate. I need to, I was just on a 3-day silent retreat. And it's like, I'm gonna be nobody. Not gonna be a dad. I'm not gonna be a husband. I'm gonna just be and come back to the seed layer. And that, is anyone that's practiced meditation and the understand the quality of emptying your mind. It's a really energizing and important function. It's what we do every night when we go to bed. Okay, so I'm going to walk through some examples, applications of this model. And the first might be there's a parent and a teen, and there's 2 weeks of piled up clothes and mess everywhere and dirty dishes. And the instinct of the parent is to lecture the kid, punish, hierarchical model. reward, punishment. My judgment is you're doing a bad job with your chores, right? Purely hierarchical. Um, Toxically hierarchical would be saying you're lazy, you're a mess, right? Just to sort of disconnected from the seed layer. But then the parent pauses uh, and connects and recalls and apprehends the teenager's sacred worth and her uniqueness, and expands into what has she been dealing with, what has been going on in her life, and recalls, what, something's happened. Your best friend moved away, and you're dealing with the grief of this loss. So he's balancing his experience with her and the functioning of the home with the person and larger context of her friendship. So there's still a need to have a home that doesn't invite bugs and mice, but he can communicate in a way that is respectful and uh, holistic. So he might say something like, listen, I imagine you're going through a really hard time with your best friend moving away. I notice you're not doing your chores like you normally do. I get it, but it's where they get done. Can I support you, help with that? Do you want to talk about anything with me? So this, I'm not going to abandon the hierarchy. I'm not going to abandon the situation, and I also want to talk to you about you as just as a person as well. So, um, so another example would be in the workplace. Uh, Someone has to hand in a report or get a slide deck ready, and the deadline slips. So again, the hierarchy would focus on judgment and power. Do they need to be reprimanded? Do they need to be fired? It's all about role. If the boss was really reactive, they might yell or disparage the person. There's a lot of possibilities in terms of what when hierarchy is going badly. Um, and then the manager slows down and connects to themselves and is sensitive to what the other person might be going through, and affirms their worth, tries to connect to their growth potential. And that's really important. I think just being able to trust in my work as a therapist, believing in the growth potential in spite of the behavior, right? Not identifying the person with the status quo or what's happening, but believing and having faith in their process, engaging in a process and growing is really important. Um, and so from the perspective of the person that made the mistake, that didn't finish the report, they might say, listen, the deadline passed. I missed it. I failed to be aware of it. I didn't write it down. I'm responsible. And so there's still a need for accountability, but the person does not say, I'm garbage, I'm unworthy. They don't hit themselves and cut themselves at the roots. They stay connected to their dignity and stay in a loving connection with themselves as they uh, try to do better. Another example could be in a church community or any kind of nonprofit organizational. There's an issue with the budget, and there's a debate going on between two people about what should happen. Um, and the person in power just shuts everything down, uses their power to control the situation. Um, and when the leader pauses, she recognizes, hey, I'm reactive to conflict. I don't like it. Um, Maybe I could provide a space for better dialogue rather than just shutting it down. And so she tries to facilitate a conversation and openness. Again, trying to respect uniqueness and differences of perspective, and using power as a container for dialogue rather than uh, being overly controlling and hierarchical in a negative way. So it might sound like, hey, I hear you both care about what we're doing here. You're unique in what you want and how you think we should use our resources. Why don't you express yourself, express your position, um, and show that you understand each other, right? So utilizing a therapy technique of, don't speak until you've demonstrated understanding of the other person. So, okay, so when I think, um, you know what, maybe I can pause. It's a lot of content, and ask if there are any comments or questions that people have, anything that's not clear. We'll have more of a chance at the end to have a more fuller discussion. Eileen has her hand, her virtual hand raised.
I think your work here is so important, and I'm thinking of all my years I spent in corporate America and how people were just treated as roles, not as
Hmm.
people. And uh, um, I'm thinking in particular, like when it was time for raises to be given out. I forget what they named it, but there was this curve, and there was a limited amount of money to pass out. And so they just plugged people into this curve. And some people were at the low end of getting a raise, and some people were at the high end, and most of the people were in the middle. It was so
Hmm.
disconnected from people as human beings. And oftentimes the when somebody was having a performance issue in their role, the the hierarchical person above them, their boss, would not just comment on the role, but would basically attack um,
Character?
their yeah them as a person, so it
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
it would intertwine, it would mix up the role with the value of the person as a human being,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how damaging that is to people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's yeah, a great thing to share. If we disconnect through disparaging or through abuse or the kind of things that you're describing, if we disconnect people from their seed layer, look at all the resources they lose out on, right? They lose out on their growth potential, their uniqueness, their worthiness, their connection, the fact that they can engage and process. So yeah, I think it's such
So,
a
so
loss.
we're judging them not at the role level, we're judging them at the uniqueness person level.
Yeah, yeah,
Sometimes when,
and
when the way the
yeah,
criticism was handled, it wasn't handled as, your sandcastle needs some adjustment. It was
yeah,
like, your sandcastle is terrible and you shouldn't exist, you know.
exactly, exactly. When it gets to that depth of like existential, your being is being judged. Um, that's bullying, right? That's where it really hurts.
Yeah, and I don't
S-
think that bosses do understand, in many cases, they don't understand the difference between the role and your uniqueness as a person. So
mhm.
it's not like they're doing that, they're intentionally attacking you as a person, but that's just what they do
Yeah,
because they don't understand this difference.
yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, and imagine if people could be provided the insight to tell that distinction. How can I provide a judgment that's necessary that respects and uplifts a person's uniqueness and sacred worth? Um, they're, aren't they going to be better off if I keep them standing, right? Like that's why Virginia would literally hold people's hands sometimes, put an arm around them because it's like we're going through a change. I'm asking you to try something difficult. I want to support you. And that support is I see that you're worthy. I see that you can grow. I believe in you, right? All those things. So thank you. I see Wayne has his hand up. Hi, Wayne. Do you want to
Hi,
say
Tim.
something? Hi, Wayne. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. Thanks. I'm really enjoying your presentation, and it occurs to me that there are costs on both sides of if you have the boss on one side who is tearing down the personhood of the workers, and there's a cost to them, but there's also a cost to the boss too. when they do that to
Mm,
somebody. So maybe you could
mm.
speak to a little bit of that,
Well,
what
yeah,
that might be.
I think I made the comment about I believe a way of formulating evil is when you have someone or some system functioning without connection to the seed layer. And I think that's what was so profound about what Virginia said. She's look, yeah, look, there's this whole dimension of it being that we're not tapped into. I think all the humanistic uh, psychologists and philosophers at the time really helped us connect to that. So, um, that's why we want to try to have empathy for the bully because, hurt people hurt, you know. So yeah, I think that's a really good point too. And I think the lesson, and I think where I was really motivated to look at this was when I looked at the content around hierarchy and seed, I felt like there was potential there. And that's what I'm been trying to articulate. And it's the same thing that you're describing. It's like whether that boss is actually a person that we're thinking about, or when we think about internal parts parties, we think about the dictator that lives within our mind. We could say, that boss in my head really bullies me. I just want to get rid of. I wish I would, but to listen, to you know, um, engage in a dialogue, to connect to it, to expand it, to grow it, to evolve it. That's the opportunity. So that's a really good point, Wayne, to not lose sight because then the judger becomes the judged, right? And then the power dynamic just flips. Uh, so okay, I don't. Natalie, can you help me? I can't see who's next. I think there's other people raising their hand.
It's Michael. Yeah, it's Michael
Michael?
and then Mary Jo.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I think Eileen is right before me, and then so Eileen, you go first, and I'll go.
Oh, okay. Well, I just want to add that I think there is there is value in the hierarchical level in the sense of helping us. I'm not sure I'm choosing the right words, but be productive, So when we have a group of people that are trying to do something together, sometimes roles are helpful, and who can make decisions is helpful. But it's when, as you said, Tim, it's when we don't either know the seed level exists or we don't know how to put the two together in a way that honors both, that honors
Yeah.
the selves of the people in the roles. um, so I don't see the hierarchical level as necessarily something we should throw out. I see it as a helpful way of working together, doing things together, living together in relationships, but not if it's missing the seed level.
hmm Yeah, I think you could see that either extreme would be unhealthy, right? So, level would be like a hippie convent or a cult that is, just so chaotic and there isn't structure, there isn't role, there isn't healthy, you know, judgment. And then dictatorial, highly organized fascist groups would be purely hierarchical with no connection to humanity, uniqueness, and so forth. Thank you. Michael, did you have a
Yeah,
comment or
yeah, Tim,
question?
good to see you. Um, so I just love your metaphor of the guitar and the two tension points. I think your message today is especially important for our generation right now, where dichotomies are people love
Mm,
dichotomies and then they demonize each other, right?
hmm
Instead
hmm
of thinking about all the beautiful notes between the tension points and
hmm
recognizing that, and as you guys just talked, you and Eileen just mentioned we can go to the extremes and own that as what is best, and again demonize the other. I think being able to give people, because there are hierarchies in this world, so being able to give people ways to think through it and understand how can I be responsible in this, caring, compassionate, connecting, it is something people don't even consider if they can't consider that it exists. So I
Yeah,
appreciate
nice. Yeah.
you pointing out the tension points and then the possibilities for there to just be beautiful music between.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's again, I think it's the lack of awareness or apprehension, right? When hopefully when you see it and it's and that's the thing, like um people when I ask people that have met Virginia what was unique about her, they would say it's the way that she looked at you. And it's like, okay, how do you write about that? It's very difficult, but it's it's she was perceiving you at the seed level, which is an embodied seeing. And to I think your point, Michael, is there's an opportunity for responsibility that if we understand this, we can be responsible in saying, I'm not going to treat someone just at a hierarchical level. And maybe I am, but if I mess up, I'll go back and say, I'm sorry. I missed you on that. And I was focusing so much on the role that I wasn't kind. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Jo?
Um, I'm very impressed with how you articulated all of this, and I'm excited for it. And I was wondering, do you have any hopes and dreams for taking this forward, or something personal
Mm,
connected to
mm,
what you've just shared?
mm. Thank you, Mary Jo. Yeah, well, I'm trying to publish a book about this stuff, so that would be a good thing if and I'm trying to find a publisher, so um, if anyone can help me with that, that'd be great. But when my mom died in 2020 and I was holding her hand and saying goodbye to her, I remember just reflecting and uh, meditating on suffering and just wanting to do my small part to help reduce suffering in the world. And so that's a really important mission of mine to reduce dukkha, to reduce suffering as much as I can. And I think this is, for me, self-connection is a really central uh, concept or pointer to something important. So yeah, I think that vision could look like a lot of things, but being able to share today is as part of that. So thank you for being here.
And the comments that you made about the different visions that you saw, are you still having visions that come forward as you're doing your work?
Yeah, I've had, I don't know what you mean by visions, but I like visualize
Well, the
things.
cube, when you described the cube,
Oh,
seeing
do
that.
I see that? Have I seen
Yeah.
that? Well, my son is getting really into Star Trek: The Next Generation, so we started watching it, and it was that. But I'm not. I feel for me, what's empowering is I have a much more flexibility with role, um, and an ability to just put them on the hanger and take a break from them. So it's been really empowering for me, and yeah, when you're rooted in knowing your true worth is not in the role. The role, I think of the role, my image for the role is a window and you're the light, and your job is just to shine your light through that particular window. And there's an infinite possible ways of how that ends up. Not to get preoccupied with the role needs to be this or it needs to look a certain way or it needs certain kind of outcomes. But if you're shining your light through that window, that's that's a good place to focus on. So, anyways, I hope that answers your question, Mary Jo. Thank you so much for your comment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jean. Jean, you're still muted. Oops, you're muted again. Okay, here you go.
Thanks, Tim, for the in-depth work you have been doing. And I am particularly appreciative of opening up the, if you will, the essence, the potential essence of hierarchy. I actually have stopped using that word when I talk about the hierarchical model, if you will, versus the seed model. I like getting rid of versus. It's hierarchy and seed. And I'm using the term the threat and reward, which I don't particularly like that way of naming that process, but it was always confusing to me. In families, there is a hierarchy with parents, and needed, necessary, useful. So the idea that somehow it was so easy to take on an attitude that hierarchy is necessarily bad was always a bit disturbing for me. So I appreciate how you are sharing things more on a continuum as opposed to either or. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's see what else I have. Okay, so this is tied to self-connection. So when we think about these four elements that we were looking at earlier, if we can understand how a person is defined, how relationships are defined, how events are defined, how change or attitude of change is articulated, we can really understand a person. In terms of understanding self-connection, this is a really important application that I would mark as there are four toxic delusions that disconnect hierarchy and seed. And that is for the self, we identify with the role. So what we've been talking about, my worth is found in my personality, my ego, my role, my thoughts, right? And so this illusion, this Maya is based on this over identification. It's hard. It's really hard not to identify. And I think most of you who are therapists or work with people will recognize how sticky it is for people to become identified with their roles. And yeah, so being able to recognize that and to practice that is really, really important. Again, my worth is in my relationship. So we define a relationship as our worth. So I'm working with a client that recently went through a breakup and he's feeling really depressed about it. And I talked to him about this image that came to me as I was talking to him. And I said, you know, you're doing so many good things at work and with your friendships and with your exercise and taking care of your body. You're so powerful in what you're able to do. To me, when I look at you, it's like you're the sun and you're looking down at the earth and you're looking at this cloud and saying, look at that. Like, that's who I am. I'm like, I'm not enough. Or she left because I'm not good enough. You're the sun and you're so powerful and you're so warm and you have so much light. And yet you're identifying with this relationship that is over. And that's a confusion, right? So we're helping, if we can be helpful, we're helping unwind or untangle the illusion. So, oops, sorry. Okay, context. My worth is in what has happened, happens, or might happen. So across time, the events, the outcomes that occur. So if I fail my exam, oh, see, that's proof that I'm unworthy, and this kind of identification to the context, to events, becomes part of self-disconnection, right? And so that self-disconnection would be, yeah, I'm no longer in touch with the seed elements of myself, right? The outcome, I failed the exam. I'm not going to be a doctor. So therefore, I'm unworthy. And so you could see how sensitive we all are to these potentials, right? Could be as simple as like I showed up late, or it could be as big as trying to achieve a big goal. So connecting to the seed, affirming it might sound like my worth is present in my I amness. I am. I don't need to add anything to that. I am. I bring my resources, my inner resources, to cope with whatever is. They don't define me. So this is, for Virginia, she would describe transformation as people becoming their own decision maker, And I would think about this as being your own identifier. So we're not projecting into things we've been conditioned to project into. We're able to define ourselves based on what's really there, what's really true. Okay. And so change, my sense of self depends on controlling things and avoiding the unknown. Change threatens who I am. So, yeah, you could see that there's a lot of people experiencing anxiety, and anxieties. The impulsive anxiety is control. What can I control here? And being able to let go or to soften in that, that I can navigate change, and I can navigate changes in roles, getting demoted, getting promoted, retiring. I can navigate these things because I'm solidly rooted in knowing myself, no matter what roles may be changing. So change is inherent to life, necessary for growth. My worth is separate from what may change. And so that separation, you could think of it as the mindful separation between experience and the experiencer, that I can apprehend what's happening out here and not identify with it. But then when I'm connected to my resources, then I can engage in a transformational change. Okay, so another famous or really important Virginia quote: I want to love you without clutching, appreciate you without judging, join you without invading, invite you without demanding, leave you without guilt, and criticize you without blaming, and help you without insulting. If I can have the same from you, then I think then we can truly meet and enrich each other. So I think this quote really points to the possibility of integration of the hierarchy and the seed, and is a good segue into thinking about the tree of life model, because I would maybe pick out some of these things that Virginia's saying, and I'd say, I want to be able to appreciate you and judge what you're doing at the level of role and the context we're talking about. I want to be able to judge you and criticize you without losing you, without disconnecting from your worthiness. I want to be able to do the important things that we need to do at the hierarchy to have a productive company, to have a healthy marriage, to have a healthy family, to parent well. I want to be able to judge you lovingly in connection. And so I want to sort of sprinkle some of what we're talking about in this to show there's a way that we can reclaim words that feel like bad words and make them positive, make them constructive in a healthy way, in a growth-oriented way, in a redeeming way. So, okay, so now we can get into more of a discussion. That's all I have for today in terms of the content, but there's a whole book I've written that's really long. So I hope that this content was useful for you, and there's some jumping off points. Maybe you could share what are some examples you've experienced where hierarchy is disconnected from seed. What does a healthy hierarchy look like? And where if you can fuse a role with your worth. But please, open up. I'm happy to open the discussion, whatever direction people want to take. And thank you for listening.
Okay, Eileen.
I have an example for number one that's just been in my mind, and I just have to share it. So I was working in aerospace, and this big boss called a meeting of this group of people that had been identified as high potential people. So, we had this role that we were supposed to be high potential people. And he called us together to ask us for ideas on something that he was trying to do. I don't even remember what the something was, but so he asked us for ideas. And so people started offering ideas. And what I noticed was after each idea that was presented, he would immediately judge it and then basically dismiss it. Um, and
Mm.
and so it was like pretty soon there were no more ideas coming. And so for some crazy reason, I raise my hand and I go, "Excuse me," but he's going, "Well, why aren't there any more ideas?" And so I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, it's really hard for me to come up with ideas when my ideas are judged as stupid as soon as I say them." And and you know, and
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
he still didn't get it. He just goes, "Well, it would be worth not worth my time to listen to stupid ideas." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is
Hmm.
crazy." I mean,
Yeah.
I think especially I think the business world, but today in our societies, we do that all the time. I mean, there is no room for the seed model, it feels like to me. And
Well,
it
yeah, it's
it's
interesting, Eileen, when yeah, sorry, go ahead.
that's enough. I don't need to say anymore.
Well, yeah, I think when you're in, and I don't know if this is the space that you're in, but if you think about the difference between an established company versus a startup, like what you're talking about, if there's an iterative point that needs probably a lot of seed level support, right? Like when you're just starting something, it needs a lot of nurturing. But then when it becomes a bigger thing and there's much more structure, you need to really pay attention. And so judgment at the beginning of iterating an idea is less helpful to fertilizing the creative spirit. So anyways, it just kind of opens up something to think about in terms of an application of like, when do we need to be emphasizing seed layer versus when do we need to be emphasizing hierarchy? So that person was maybe emphasizing hierarchy ahead of people just trying to put seeds down. It's like, oh, that seed's awful. It's like, well, how can you be so sure? So thank you. Okay.
Next, Pat.
Is it possible to take down the PowerPoint so we can see the people, Tim?
Yeah.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, Pat.
Tim, I just wanted to say that this is good stuff that you're talking about because it falls in line with the kind of work that I've been doing. So there's a couple things. One, your distinction between role and self, really brought to light how people define themselves and are taught to define themselves in terms of what they do. And then the who I am goes underground. And
Mm-hmm.
I've seen so many people uh, who are very successful, right? Very professional, right up there. And they're just so lost and desperate because they've never been affirmed at their who I am level, right?
Yeah.
So I think that role and self, like doing versus being, who you are is different and manifests
Yeah.
like what you were saying, that light that shines through the window, that kind of stuff. The next
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Mm-hmm.
when we talked about words, I'm like, I love that you talked about that. Like, how do you how do you reframe a word that's just jam-packed filled with like negative meaning, like judgment and
Yeah.
criticism? I've
Yeah.
moved to
Yeah.
use evaluate, sort out, take another look at what's on the banquet table. What do we need at one time or another? Which leads me to Jean brought up like her dilemma with the versus and the threat and reward versus the seed. And one of the ways that has helped me is I did a presentation a long time ago at a iLearn conference on relational cultural theory, the integration with Virginia Satir's threat and reward and seed model. And it's through relational cultural theory that I got this language: power over and empowerment, and how that's a process, not just in terms of like larger communities, but also a process in a person's life, because we're born into an oppressive system, and that's usually what we learn first, right? And then as we grow and mature and come to claim ourselves, form our identities, etc., right? We can make different choices, to operate in more empowering ways and more nurturing ways. And one of the things that I liked about relational causal theory is Jean Baker Miller talks about temporary inequality, right? That in certain situations, like when you're a kid, you're in temporary inequality. Like you're smaller than everybody else is like a big thing. And the same with your like
That's
you
probably
do.
not the experience for the kid, but yeah,
No,
that's
but
true.
anyways, but like when you start a job, like you're coming in as the new kid on the block or the apprentice, or you're doing an internship,
Yeah.
And those are all, in my opinion, feeding grounds for hierarchical structure to be negative on a person. But when a person realizes that, okay, fine, I'm here to teach you, you want to learn, my job is to nurture you. My job is to get out of being a parent, right? My job is with my students to get out of being a teacher so that they're launched on their own way to full parity, right? So I'm just sharing with you the way I think about the movement from.
It makes me think of like something that I wrote about in this book, which is I think when we're really engaged in a vital tree of life system, we actually can play with the roles. There's a moment when the teacher becomes a student. We can and so it's like it's like a parts party or a hat party, a role party, where it's like the hats are all in the middle and we can take turns. It's like, oh, I saw something about the business that I think we could improve. It's like the CEO, if he could listen and take that feedback, that might be really useful rather than being stuck in the role. So okay, I don't know if was there anyone else that had a question
there's
or a comment?
Jillian. Jillian, your hands is up. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm propped up in my hospital bed at home. I'm recovering from surgery. So this tree, I'm a permaculturalist and I work with eco-villages. So the tree model with the roots, the trunk, the branch, and the toroidal field is something that is very much part of our lexicon. So I appreciate this. And there's a couple of things. One is a tree doesn't just arrive as a tree at full-blown maturity. It goes through a lot of stages of growth. And even with the construct of seed, what is this process of something that's insisted and it's protected, and what are the catalysts that help to move it into turning those starches into sugars and softening the shell and putting a shoot up and going down. So that was just something I wanted to bring into the mix, because we have a tendency to look at things as static as opposed to something that's growthful and evolutionary over time, even in terms of our imagery. This process of succession of not only an individual plant, but groups of plants over time is something that I work with a lot. So I just wanted to bring that in to inoculate the field. I'm working with a person, and Alice knows I had a chance in a one-on-one breakout room to talk with her about it yesterday, of a person who's Italian and is from things that didn't happen when he was younger. There is almost no separation between the role and the seed. He cannot handle any kind of criticism at all, partly because he received so much criticism for being different when he was young. Well, not partly, but I would say largely. And it's so this was like what you're describing as a practice of I have of what you say. And I love that you've done your work around Virginia and watch videos and things of just how, and talk to people of how she could meet people, seeing their essence and saying, essentially, I'm here and I'm connected with you and your incontrovertible value as a person, like a star in the system, like you're saying. And yet there's so much scar tissue in a system that cannot allow that separation to happen. But I'm open to your comment or feedback, but I just wanted to at minimum say that your model helped to give me even more strength about continuing on the path of trying to reach this person in and through and around the
Yeah.
scar tissue of while honoring the seed, which is always what I try and do, is honor his goodness and his uniqueness. Yet the scar tissue of
Yeah.
not being able to receive feedback has been very problematic because he's founded a community and he experiences the same or similar problems or conflicts or friction over and over and over again, and he cannot see.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, who knows what this person needs, but I mean, I think that you, to the extent that you can come into contact with what he on a cognitive level may not be in touch with, right? It's your presence with this person and being able to silently hold a space for that. And that might be, hey, could we just pause talking for a second, and I just want to make contact with you and just let you know that I appreciate this about you, or I appreciate that you're here, or in spite of the scar tissue that you're still trying. Like, what is that, right? What is that? That's right. That's the growth momentum from the seed, right? And to just share that in a humble way of like, people need time, the time that they need to heal. So I'm not trying to rush, but I also, because we can get lost in thinking, we can get lost in the narrative, we can get lost in the impact. And yet there's more to us than our impacts. Well, thank you. Okay, we're good.
Jean. Jean, you're
Oh,
still muted.
I am laughing at myself, thinking about what it was like for me right out of graduate school and to be studying with Virginia and taking every word she said as truth and literal and etc. And knowing that there were times when she might say this way and then this way at a future time, but not fully integrating all of that. And so with the idea that so many of us lived with about it was hierarchy versus seed, it's like that's her old dilemma. It's one or the other. It's not a choice. We
yeah.
don't have choice when it's a dilemma. And so I'm
Yes.
just
Yeah.
just laughing at myself about the process of how to fully appreciate Virginia, her humanness, and the printed word, and how it can get so ingrained and set inside of us, or inside of
Yeah.
me, I should
Yeah.
say. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, thank you again. And I like being able to laugh at myself. So just thank you.
Good. Good. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I mean, I think that's when I was on the silent retreat on the weekend, there were 4 modes of states of being that we explored. One was thinking, one was relaxing, one was observation, and one was concentration. And so there's a particular emphasis on observation to, and I don't really know what the monk was talking about with all of these, but the thing that I really focused on as a practice was observation. So when we observe, we step back from the reactivity of ourselves in relationship to the world. Could be the reactivity or our addiction to our phones. It could be our reactivity to our perceptions or thoughts, right? There's so much reactivity, and that's why we
Mhm.
get tired, because we
Yeah.
think a certain thing, we judge a certain way, we're living in this story, whether it's a belief, a perception, expectation, we live in these frames that then we're reacting to. And so the ability to write out what am I thinking? Let me look at that, journaling. And so a lot of the things that I know you're all familiar with in your work with people and work with your clients. So, yeah. Okay. Mary Jo, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, I do. I really experience your description of your work really includes both the intellectual process and the emotional process, that I find you're blending both your total part when you look at the concept body, emotion, mind, and spirit, because that's the wholeness of who we are, all aspects of ourselves. And we haven't been taught how to deal, for example, with spirituality many times because it's been housed under religion versus a higher power or a higher source. And so Virginia actually struggled with that concept as well from her life journey. But I felt as you gave your presentation, I could experience the dimensions, particular between the emotional and the mental aspect. And I'm still going back to when you commented about the beaches and the sand and the water and the different things that you shared there, because to me, it was a nature experience, an outdoor opportunity that gave my interpretation, or my guess, not interpretation, guess, is that you're really exploring things in this. This is a new piece for you, possibility. And it's not uncommon in the work that I've done in multiple countries over many years, helping people for this next dimension is a journey. Like I said, even for me, as I began to walk it and deal with the teachings from the indigenous people, I began to learn things from a very different way than my academic intellectual thing. And as a psychiatric mental health nurse and family therapist, that point of view put me in a house that had a box to it. And it wasn't, I guess you could call it hierarchy in a way, because I remember when my clinical professor said, you ought to study Virginia's work. And I said, well, who is she? And she came to Texas, where I was at the time. And when she walked out on the stage and she started working with families, in my head, I kept saying, what is a diagnosis? Who is the patient? So that, because that's how I was taught, that you figure out what your role is to help that person. And so that was a big eye opener for me. So my comment is, I really see the balance between emotional and mental and how you've applied it in your role as a therapist. And if you're, that's one of the things that I've heard Michael talk about, and what Pat was sharing as well, as we deal with a whole perspective of ourselves and getting the door opening in new places, like Virginia's fourth birth work. That is the newer dimension that we're looking at. When I was at iLearn a couple years ago, we started and launched a fourth birth experience there. And so that was a new thing. And it's looking at stepping into your spiritual empowerment and alignment of new things that you're going to see, quote unquote, or experience. And I love the platform that we have here, where we can have the discussions, because to me, that's opening the door to look at new things. And Eileen has mentioned it multiple times in the things that have opened in new ways. And so
Mary
guess
Jo,
that
I'm getting a little bit, Mary Jo, I want to understand you a little bit better. And I wonder if, is there a direct comment or guidance you're trying to give me? Like I'm not quite grasping the message. So I just want to be transparent.
okay.
I'm not
Do you want to give me
really.
some observations that I saw you do that verified what I said? Would you like for me to say that? They're simple things.
Okay.
When you comment what you just did, you put your right hand on your face. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the right side of the body has to deal with the mental aspects. And at different times, then you put your hand on the other side of the face and you're laughing when you're doing that. And that's the emotional side.
Okay.
So that's why Virginia did these kind of observations. They're beyond one aspect. And what she would do is she'd go up to a person, and when she was beginning to engage with them, and oftentimes I'd see her put her hand above the body, but wouldn't touch the body unless she said, "Is it okay if I put my hand on your shoulder?" And if they said yes, she would do it. But sometimes it didn't seem appropriate to just say that. She'd put her hand above the body, and it's like she would engage energetically. And then at some point, she would get closer and then put the hand there and notice how the person responded. And that's when you're teaching body energetics and helping people to understand, because we have within each of us our internal wisdom. And our brow ties into our visions, and our crown ties into our spiritual connection. And there's ways to align these and introduce us in new ways. So that's all.
Okay, good. Okay, well, thank you for being here and for listening and
One more thing,
contributing.
Tim, one more thing. Just to sort of back up what Mary Jo is saying, I was at that I Learn conference where she did her workshop on the fourth birth. And I think Jean was there too, and she was 6 with that RSV. I came down with the RSV. Specifically, I looked like death warmed over, and I went to Mary Jo's workshop. And she's given the workshop, and she tuned in on me and said, and this woman, da 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 da. She came over and did a piece of energetic work with me where well, I believe she cleared whatever it was that I was carrying, cleared my system. You remember that, Mary Jo. And immediately after she did that piece of energetic work and whatever else we did, I can't remember all of it, my whole body being came alive in a different way. And I was not like death wormed over. I was not fully alive, but I had enough energy, because I think that was the last day, because I was so worried about how am I going to get home, right? How am I going to get on the plane and do what I need to do, being so sick? And it was miraculous. It really was extremely powerful. So her work is just amazing. I can't say enough about it.
Okay, cool.
Thank you,
Well,
Mary
thank
Jo.
you. Okay, bye. Have a great time at the conference, everyone.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you,
Thank you,
Tim.
everyone.
Very much.
See you in another workshop. Bye.